Oh, this is one of my favorites that I have a hard time growing. 7 to 9. I can't grow it in my yard. It doesn't always stick around very long. Microclimates. We all have them. Sometimes when you go to the big box store, you get something, you play plant roulette, and you get something and you realize, oh, I already have this. Well, that's not a disaster. You put it someplace else in your yard. In a different situation. Maybe it's in a pot instead of the ground. Maybe it's in the east instead of the west. You can start learning some things about your garden this way. I had the blue light in the front yard that was on that trellis thing. Thought I killed it. And I went and got another one. This is when I was still subject to remorse on these events. I'm better now. Lots of work, attachment issues. Okay, working on it. Went and got a new one, and I know this has not happened to anyone else in this room, ever, except for me. It took me about 8 weeks to get around to planting it. Maybe 10. And I went to plant it, and lo and behold, the blue light clematis had resprouted. So lesson 8. You've killed your clematis. You think you've killed it. It may only be nearly mortally offended. Leave it for a year. And I don't mean a growing season, I mean a year. I know you have other things to do in your yard. At least 1 million other things to do in your garden. Leave it alone, walk away. If in a year it has not reappeared, now you can try something new. Or you can try the same thing and having learned that, you know, I planted it too high, I need to plant it a little deeper next time. Okay? The other thing is, if you got that second plant, realize that you don't need it because, oh my gosh, it came back. Put it in another part of the yard. I put it in the back of my house because I didn't have a garden back there yet. And it bloomed 3 weeks, 4 weeks earlier than the one in the front. And that's how I realized I had a microclimate in the back of my house. It was warmer there. I could plant more tender types of plants behind my house because it's a brick house and the back faces west. So you can learn stuff. I can put this plant in the back of my house. It's going to die a lot. Sometimes when you see prune hard, it doesn't mean cut everything down. It means it's going to die back to the ground anyway. All right? Pruning, people freak out about pruning. Pruning woody plants scares people. It's so permanent. Okay, first of all, how much do you pay for most clematis plants? $10? You know, something like that. You killed a $10 plant, at worst. Or you've given a $10 plant a bad haircut. This is not a reason for tremendous grief. It's okay. Watch what the plant does. If it dies down to the ground every year and the new growth comes from the ground, from the crown, you know, got to prune it hard. The plant will tell you what to do. You don't have to necessarily get caught up in looking up, is it group 1, 2, or 3? No, it needs to be cut down because all the new growth is coming from the bottom. I don't know what group that is, but I know what to do. So this is, the reason they don't recommend this plant for beginning growers is it is difficult to grow here because you're pushing the zone issue. And I wouldn't recommend it for you because I don't want you to have a bad experience and then reject, oh, forget it, I have a hard time with clematis. Not a good one to start with. Good to take on when you've had some experience and gotten a thicker skin. Integifolias are wonderful plants. Love this in the front of the border. You can do 2 things with this. You can grow it on a tower, and there is a huge variation. I get this plant about 2 to 3 feet high. I have another one that's 5 feet high. Now, if it's 2 to 3 feet high, and you let it sprawl, what's the diameter? 4 to 6. Okay, so you've got to take that into account. Mrs. Robert Bride, 6 to 8 feet. No, that's right, sure. My yard, she's 10. That means if I let her sprawl, she'd be 20 feet in diameter. Okay, so you got to do the math. I used to have this was taken when I had a lot more Pachysandra in my front yard, and I realized if I pulled out a lot of the Pachysandra, I could have more clematis. That's a mathematical thing, you know. So I started growing it on a small tour. But it was wonderful growing it through the ground cover because it would kind of crawl along the ground and the flower would pop up, 3 feet away from the crown. So it's just a delight. So it's a great way to grow this family of plants. This is going to die back to the ground every year, and all the new growth is going to come from the crown. It's so easy. Here's Bill, the notorious Bill McKenzie. 15 to 20 easily. I tried a lot of techniques with this plant to grow it in my yard. I tried pruning it hard more than once a year, but he still tried to kill Joe. It's a great plant in the right place, wonderful yellow flowers, and you get these wonderful silvery seed heads. So it's a lovely plant, but you've got to have the room for it. The Texensis varieties, they're native to North America. Sir Trevor Lawrence is my favorite. He was my first. Don't even run with that. Flowers, the first couple years are maybe an inch or an inch and a half. As the plant matures, the flowers mature as well. They get larger. So by the time the plant is really mature and established, they're usually about 2.5 to 3 inches long. They look a lot like a lily flower tulip. And they're just beautiful. If you have a red flowered, large flowering hybrid, it is likely it has Texensis genetics because the Texensis species is one of the few that has true red genetics. Now, if you've had a bad experience with clematis, or you have been put off by someone saying they're difficult to grow, this is the family you start with, the Viticellas. They're bomb-proof, they're fire-proof, they're radiation-proof, they're just proof against everything. Polish Spirit, I had planted that in my ignorance between 2 peonies, and it was overgrowing one of the peonies. It was smothering the peony because it was just so big. And I went in and I dug it out. And of course, you don't want to disturb the peony tubers because 2 or 3 years without flowers is just not something that I can handle. And plus, you know, and I always do these really stupid things myself. Hard up against a fence between 2 peonies. Well, let's make it easy for myself, right? Yeah. So I ended up actually having to go in with my hands, always gloved because there is tetanus in the soil, and always get your tetanus shot renewed every 10 years. And I pulled it out, and I was just devastated. I'm sure I had killed her. Put her in next to the garage, and I'm like, oh my God, therapy. I gotta call Catherine. She's like, don't worry about it. No problems. And every year, she grows up 10 feet easily, blooms like a champ. I cut it down every spring. Come to the workshop, you'll see what I do. 5 to 7, the youngest stems, cut down to 18 inches every year, and she goes up 10, 12 feet, full, blooming, full of flowers, gorgeous. You want purple, get Polish Spirit. You want pinkish red, get Julia Corbin. You want white, get Alba luxurians. Betty Corning's a great one. There's a double, which I can't remember what I have. Minuet's a bicolor. There's a wonderful range of flower color. And the flowers are not huge, but there's so darn many of them, who cares? Now this is a group of clematis that what you want to do is you want to put these near the border because they don't look like clematis. So what you're going to do is you're going to put it near the border so that as you're taking your friends through your garden, you say, oh, look at that lovely Clematis heractifolia. I remember when I got that just a few years ago. It's doing so well. And then you just casually keep strolling on while they're going, what? What? These are called the hyacinth clematis because the individual flowers look quite a bit like individual flowers on Hyacinth orientalis. Unfortunately, they don't have the same scent, although many in this group are scented, as are many of the montanas. Usually in the blue to white range, they range from rather modest plants. I have never gotten China Purple 3 to 4 feet. I've gotten Allen Bloom 3 to 4 feet. But I don't want China Purple 3 to 4 feet. She's about 2.5, and I'm quite happy with that near the front of my border. Robert Bryden, Mrs. Robert Bryden, as I mentioned, gets up to 10. So there's a lot of range in terms of the size of this family of plants. But they are really interesting, very different, flowering late in the season, and you don't need to prune them very heavily, or you can if you want. I prune the Mrs. Robert Bryden pretty hard because otherwise I think she'll take over the front yard.